This morning we are going to talk about supplemental income. Supplemental income is something that's very important when you're talking about the whole realm of wildlife improvement, especially whitetail improvement. We are in a age right now that this is a topic that is brought to the forefront a lot because of because of trying to gain some what folks believe is supplemental income to help carry their farm. There's a certain point there in the acreage amount where I start seeing this come to more of the forefront and be more of a influential situation to work through. There's not a lot of the 20s and 40s out there that maybe have the impact that a larger parcel does. We see a lot more of this on bigger parcels where the supplemental income starts a process of trying to put some money back into folks' pockets. And we're going to talk about today, we're going to talk about the goods and the bads, the pros and the cons about supplemental income. Now, to me, the biggest supplemental income thing that I run into as far as government, so these are kind of separated, so we're going to do the first one here, is more focused on the government payback, if you will, the government funding programs, is CRP. And that obviously that CRP is Conservation Reserve Program. Down in the Midwest when you're talking farming, that's crop rotation program. Up here when we're talking about supplemental income on setting old farmland aside, the government term for that, the CRP, is Conservation Reserve Program. Now, what makes that CRP program? Well, I'm going to kind of give you a rundown here so this all connects with you. The FSA, the Farm Service Agency, is the one that supplements, controls, and supplies the funding for the CRP program through the government. Well, here's an issue that I run into with CRP. There's a couple of things. One, the point that I've got marked here on the board is the first topic that we're going to talk about. One is it's a 15-year program. There are situations where they're less, but that kind of varies where you're at in the country. The average contract that's written on a CRP program is 15 years with a landowner, a tax-paying landowner. Now, where does that bring the problem into if you have let's use a 40, and you have a section of a 40-acre parcel that you feel is unimproved, unavailable to improve, or you can't use it for anything, so you're trying to get that residual income or that supplemental income to come back in your pocket. Well, that is something that you have to really dig deep, and you have to take the fraction. When you're talking small parcels, you're going to talk about fractions of the amounts of money, and you need to stretch that over a 15-year thought process to make sure that's really what you want to do. Inside of that 15-year program, the government controls the government now controls your habitat improvements on that parcel. Now, they will go in and take, if it's 10 acres, let's say, obviously you only get paid for that 10 acres of that CRP that they put that into, and it's a promotion to help other environmental species outside of the whitetail deer, outside of wildlife in general. It takes in butterflies, and they are planting stuff in that CRP, that native grass, to kind of inhabit the bees and stuff, and the bees are great. But what comes into that is if you want to expand your deer habitat, and a lot of the parcels that I see that I'm on that have an area that's open field, and they don't want that into ag. They've already decided that they don't want it into ag. They would rather put that into a CRP program because they feel that pays more dividends back. Here's the issue with that is once that's rolled into that program, you are out of control. the government now is in control of that program. You have to abide by their set in stone plantings. Well, here's the problem with that. Within that 15-year program, the native grass that they are going to plant on that to keep it out of ag production. And it's kind of funny how this whole CRP program came to be. Is it was a conservation reserve program years ago. It was focused on holding the farm ground so it didn't get planted into trees or developed. Let's say it was a program to hold. It was a kind of a bank, if you will, an agricultural set-aside bank. So a land bank. So it set all this this land in there. Then what it did is if you were wanting to farm it in the future, then it kept that from being developed and planted to trees. And then with the next owner, if that sold down the road, would have the opportunity to refarm. Well, here's the problem. I feel that the program has switched gears, and it's a program now to keep agriculture off the ground. They don't want it going back to fields. They want it planted into this program. That's why they've stretched this. They planted into that native grass. That's why they've stretched that program to 15 years. It's a fraction. It depends on where you're at in the country, the amount that pays. My biggest thing is this, guys. That native grass that they are planting, that is mixed with, that is incorporated with big blue stem. It's incorporated with a bunch of prairie grasses. It's incorporated with, there is switchgrass in it, but very, very small amounts of switchgrass. They'll go, some parts of the country I've seen, they sow sunflowers into it. They sow all this stuff that is supposed to be productive for setting aside and giving back to the environment through the wildlife. The problem is, I am yet to see this. Maybe there's something out there, but I am yet to see let's refocus that attention. I am yet to see one of those plantings on a farm, no matter what the size, that if you're in an area where you do get snow or ice, I am yet to see any of that program stand up to the harsh environments. Well, that program is great up until November, when habitat is needed the most. It's no different than setting up your farm for whitetail hunting on summer patterns or summer habitat, and then not having side cover for the animals or thermal cover for the animals to get through that, or having them, so they're there on your property and being able to get through winter or cold temperatures in November, December, January. So to me, you really got to weigh that out. I feel that it pays back way more through your functionality and your control if you have somebody that's helping you set that plan into how to get that switchgrass, solid switchgrass, with maybe then you can incorporate some Egyptian wheat screening around that in certain areas if you need the extra height. But switchgrass will stand up to the elements, and the pheasants, the rabbits, and all your critters are able to forage through that and use it as shelter, and use it as a food value, and they use it as a mode of survival. The CRP programs that they plant, guys, look cool, and it's no cost out of your pocket to plant it, but it's not the income that comes back from them, unless you're talking about thousands of acres, hundreds of acres, let's say. The payback on that, to me, if you're gearing your property towards hunting, then it's not the way to go. Now, but if you're watching this and you're somebody that just wants to buy a farm and not use it for hunting, and you want to utilize that ground to produce something for the environment or for wildlife, then by all means enroll it into the CRP program, because that's the program for you. But even that said, when you don't be disappointed when you enroll that into that program, and that native grasses, that light stem, as I call it, doesn't hold up to the climate, and it's not doing anything for the environmental species that you want it to. So two different platforms there. Obviously, most of the folks that are watching this are gearing towards a hunting situation. So that's one thing to look at. Weigh your 15 years out over your profitability or your production on your property, and the holding capability that it really has for deer and or the extra wildlife. So 2 and 3 here are focused on the same realm of understanding with folks, but they're two different situations that we're going to touch on. There are government programs out there, such as the Forest Reserve Program, but keep in mind, you really need to focus on what each one of them and how they state that, because there are programs out there that help landowners focus their attention on timber stand improvement, but some of those come with a tax break, and you also have to open that ground to the public. TSI, guys, timber stand improvement. Now, timber stand improvement ties into what we just touched on, also with the income factor that you have in understanding, is it what your property needs? Now, timber stand improvement is totally different than the number 3. Timber stand improvement is focused on boards per foot. It's focused on the capability of regeneration through marketable timber, and it does not, outside of what folks will tell you, it does not focus the attention on wildlife and or hunting. It's strictly to get you the over a stretched amount of years, such as the 15-year program in CRP. It's meant to get you the most supplemental income stretched over 10, 20, 30 years. But TSI is like ag that I call ever-changing ag. It's the ever-changing timber. On small parcels, you do not have the capability of taking that time and or area set aside to improve multiple times over multiple years. The reason for that is the ground cover, the stem count, and the browse that we need in order to make your property function at the highest capability that it possibly has. You need that understory, that undergrowth, and TSI is just opposite. TSI wants to manage your marketable timber, and the canopy that comes along with that, the invasion that comes along with that, every 5 years, 10 years, whatever that forester sets in place for you, comes in and they're harvesting timber. Yes, you have supplemental or residual income that comes off that, but you are changing, this year, this 5 acres is cut, or 10 acres is cut on your 40. Then, 5 years later, this 5 or 10 acres is cut. Well, the habitat completely changes as you go around. Larger parcels, I'm talking, 600, 640s. I see this up in the Upper Peninsula, the 1,200 acre timber lots, if you will, the timber ground up there. That is something where you may look, you may have a possibility to look into that to get some of that residual income to help carry a parcel of that size and still have the capability to hunt outside of those areas that and use those for different things, such as a clear cut for refood, or to meet that the browse intake, if you will, in those pockets that they're making. Now, on a small parcel in most of the country, that's not the case. So timber stand improvement is focused on boards per foot. It's not focused on hunting. Can you hunt a property that also has TSI? Yeah, you can. They're not going to destroy your food plots or anything like that. But when I walk on a property, I can tell you a property that is, whether it was initially it's in that program at that time that I walk on, or it has been in a TSI program with somebody years past. I can tell that because you walk into a property, not only can you see through the timber, but you walk to like their food plots, for example, and there's no cover, there's no bedding areas, there's no that are attached to that adjoin to that, there's wide open transition areas. At that point, you are banking on contour and contour alone, and a heavy TSI program comes with nocturnal deer movement because there's no cover for them to get to point A to point B. Now, in a low pressured state, is that such an issue? No, it's not. In a high pressured hunting state, that's a huge issue. So that's something to keep in mind right there. Number 3 is a term that you don't hear a lot of, but it's in conjunction with TSI. It's FSI, which means forest stand improvement. So forest stand improvement is a connection through habitat improvement for whitetail deer. That's more, forest stand improvement is more of a game or a wildlife focused process, if you will. Now, can you get the income out of forest stand improvement? Yes, you can. The same as you can your TSI. The reason for that is like we always say, that program is that mindset outside of TSI is where I like to focus my attention with my clients, is because if you have a property that you have initially bought, that focus will get you the money up front out of that timber where you can like your non-deer areas. This is a big mistake that folks make. Your non-deer areas, you don't, I wish I had room here on the board and maybe we can draw that out on a later video, but if you have a non-deer area that you enter your stands from and you select cut that, now select cutting it is going to let some growth, but it's not going to have an explosion of regrowth that turns into a, possibly, depending on where you're at, in the ag level that surrounds you, it could possibly turn into a destination feed location, and if you clear cut it, and then you can't get into your stands. So what you want to do in those non-deer areas is you want to use that as a select cut, not a clear cut. Now that's where a lot of folks make the mistake, is they think I'll take all the timber out of that right now, and there's going to be no deer in there, and then that way I can decide to access across this into my stand that's on the edge of the improved habitat area. Well, that works for the first 4 years, and then your 5th, your 6th, and your 7th year, when that regeneration in that clear cut starts to come back, now the deer focus their attention onto it, and now you're blowing deer out of it because that thick stem count is coming with poplar or your hardwood regeneration off them stump jumpers. That comes into play now, and now you've got deer behind you where you wanted the deer in front of you. If it would have been select cut in those areas, then the canopy would still be not allowing that explosion of regrowth, and that's where that's what you need getting into your stand location. So that is the upfront value on forest stand improvement, that you can go into a property that you just bought or you're just starting to improve, and all built off from when the market is best. And right now there hasn't been a best point of the timber market in years in a lot of the country, but you need to focus your attention on when that is go time, and select cut that certain areas where it needs to fit a design, so your non-deer areas, and then you can clear cut some areas to make regeneration pockets if your acreage amounts allow that, and or clear cut areas that you want to put your food plots in. Instead of, what I see a lot of is I see folks that are timber stand improvement mentality, but they're going in and you start taking the trees completely out, and they just, the tree that may have had some value to it, you flush cut it, and then you got the stump to remove, obviously, with an excavator or whatever, and then that whole tree gets used as just debris, if you will, and that's when you see these huge brush berms on the side of these food plots and stuff. And not only is it an eyesore, it's a waste of your value of your timber. So if you start focusing more on the forest stand improvement side of it, that will bring your value, your initial value of your timber, if there is any, up front, and you get that all up front, and then you can continue to hunt that same property, but the property over that 15-year period that's not changing like it will change with CRP, it will change with the TSI, and if it's more of a private timber, a forest stand improvement mentality, then you're talking what you should be talking in the whitetail woods. So this is kind of a breakdown of what I believe that this is your supplemental income chart, if you will, that I see a lot of on properties. And I think there's some misinterpretation where marketing with the government and some foresters out there that push certain things to get the best bang for their dollar, if you will, for their pockets, but is it really what you want for your property?